evening, everyone. Welcome to Detroit Public Library's author series. Tonight, we're featuring a favorite author of Detroit Public Libraries because we've had him a couple times.
Yes.
Daniel Black. Daniel Black is an author and a professor of American Studies and English at Clark Atlanta University. His books include The Coming, Perfect Peace, and Tell Me of a Home. He is the winner of the Distinguished Writer Award from the Middle Atlantic Writers Association and has been nominated for the Townsend Prize for Fiction, the Ernest J. Gaines Award, the Farrell Gumley Award, the Lambda Literary Award, and the Georgia Author of the Year Award. He was raised in Blackwell, Arkansas, and lives in Atlanta, Georgia.
Yep.
Welcome, Daniel Black.
Glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
As you know, we in Detroit love Daniel Black.
I appreciate that so much. Thank you.
I've never had hosted an author where people brought him food that their mother made for him.
Yes, I love it. I love it.
So tell us what made you want to write this particular book? Where did this story come from?
I wanted to write this book, I think, because over the years, I have renegotiated my understanding of Black men. And specifically, I renegotiated what I have understood it has meant to be Black and male, to be Black and fathered in this country. I remember reading slave narratives where Black men gave everything they had for their children, and ways in which plantation existence and slave masters used that intimacy against them, meaning things like, I'll sell your child away from you if you don't do X, Y, or Z. It's, and I thought about how in the world would a father or a mother negotiate the use of their child as a kind of pawn in this game, of racism and white supremacy. And it just made me look at and think about the unthinkable ways that Black parents have used to protect and to love and to honor children that children didn't know, and particularly then with this book, my father was ill for many years, and there's grace that I began to grant my father in the years that he was ill, because of course of his ailment, but then I began to understand some of the prices he had paid, right, to be a Black father, to stay with his children, to take care of his children, when he had almost no resources to do it, right? And so in many ways, Christine, I guess I'm saying that, and I'm discovering even as I'm saying it to you in my heart, that I wanted now Black kids to understand that Black fathers often paid for us in ways we've known nothing about because they got no receipt, metaphorically speaking. And I hope this book would be a receipt to help prove to children that Black fathers have given everything they could for their existence.
I think being a parent, there's a certain fear that you have that's just, normal fear.
Right.
But I think in addition, being a Black parent, there's an additional fear, a Black parent in the United States especially.
Right.
And when I read this book, I was thinking about that on top of Jacob dealing with, just Isaac being a Black male child, then he became a gay Black male child. And that was, I think, even though on top of the prejudices and things he was dealing with, the fear, because even that fear even came true for a friend of his later on in the book.
Right.
That fear of I think he would have came, if that fear did not exist, he may have come to something a little acceptance a little bit better, I think, or sooner in his heart if that fear wasn't there.
Yes.
And life experience had, his own life experiences had given him that fear. and he was so enamored and just about, he kept saying being a man. And I think even at the end, I'm not sure if he ever came to a definition of what a man was other than what his grandpa said it was.
Right.
So what do you think? I'm hoping I'm asking the question there somewhere.
I think this book in so many ways is exactly about that. And that is what Jacob understands as a man, and how that definition for him evolves and changes so drastically over the years, right? I think that this book is about various ways that that conversation moves us to another level in terms of understanding fatherhood. Because what does it mean to raise a boy into quote unquote a man, right? What does that mean? And in so many ways, in so many ways, that means different things for different times. And what I think Jacob discovered is sometimes it means things that even he does not want or doesn't agree with, right? And the whole point of this book is for Jacob to realize that he did raise a man. He just didn't raise one like himself. And that's what's so traumatic, but also so revelatory for him, that there are men who are unlike you, Jacob. Every man is not you. Every man won't be you. Every man does not believe what you believe. Every man does not think the way you think. But the fact that he doesn't take him out of the category of manhood. And I think that's the kind of big aha, if you will, of this book. That if you're going to love sons, you're going to have to love manifestations of masculinity that do not reflect you.
Yes, because I thought it was so interesting. My husband does not like sports.
Mm,
I love sports.
mm.
I always joke and say I'm my father's only son because my father likes sports. And when I introduced my husband to my parents, my father was like, "Well, where did you find him?" So, but my husband's a car guy. My father knew nothing about cars and said, "Take it to the mechanic and let him look at it."
Wow.
So those are, examples of different ways that traditional men behave, I guess.
That's right.
So, and with Isaac, he had no, there was, but I liked, for example, how Jacob was like, I thought you would have majored in the art somehow or another. How he, when he saw that picture at the art show when he was in high school,
Yes.
that was a life changer for him. He
Right.
accepted that his son was so talented that it just could not be denied, and he was almost disappointed.
That's right.
He was disappointed that his son didn't major in the arts.
Yeah.
He was disappointed in that. He was like, well, not enough money in it. And there probably was a conversation back that Jacob probably didn't remember, where he encouraged his son to do something where he would make money to support himself, because that was so important.
Right. Absolutely. And in the, in the 80s, the notion as a black boy, the notion that, I'm going to be an artist, most parents would have said, well, do that on the side. Because there's no guarantee of a job. There's no guarantee of a future. There's no guarantee of a life. Get you something reliable and, and paint in the evenings, and Jacob certainly is aware of that. And not just aware of that, but Jacob has a place where he believes it himself.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, Isaac actually believes it himself too. So his decision to major in computer science, I think it is his way of saying, I want access to the American dream too. Yes, this freedom feels fine, but I don't want to be free and broke. And I understand that. But of course, many artists do well, and many artists are very financially well off. But it's a gamble. And as a black gay male, he felt like he had gambled enough. Like, I'm not going to gamble with my future. I'm fighting for my present. But the future, no, it has to be more secure than that.
Yeah, I want to keep eating.
Yeah.
And I live under the bridge.
That's right.
So why was it easier for Rachel to accept her son?
Because I think that we live in a society where women who are where women are taught, and we believe that women are natural nurturers. Now, I don't know that I believe that, but we are certainly in a society that believes it. And because we're in a society that believes women are natural nurturers, women accept the notion that they are natural nurturers, which means that even though she disagrees with him, part of her right, part of her responsibility, in fact, part of her expectation is that she will love her son regardless of who or what he is. Like that's a non negotiable. Very often for fathers, the reason that's negotiable is because we don't think of fathers, and we certainly don't think of grown men as those whose hearts they give to their children, right? We don't think of fathers as natural nurturers who must always have their children in the center of their emotions, right? We do not think of fathers that way. And so fathers sometimes take the position that disconnects them from their children's hearts. But mothers generally don't have that option, right? And so Rachel, even though she disagrees, she still adores him and she still loves him. And thank God she does, because that was kind of the last stronghold Jacob has emotionally to his family. I mean, Isaac has emotionally to his family.
So when Jacob went into his dark place where he wasn't bathing and he was just going to work and coming home and sitting in the dark room, I have ideas about why he went through that, but what's the background behind that, you think?
Because he Jacob, how do I want to say this? Jacob realizes that he has lost his only child, his only son. And because now Isaac is in college, what Jacob doesn't know is how to get him back. And Jacob's in that dark place because, oh my God, I've lived all this time raising a son and I've lost him. But I don't have any other son to go to. So now, how in the world do I get this back? How do I restore this? And he has no idea. But the prospect of living without him almost kills him.
Yeah, because I think when he got his diagnosis, he was ready to go. Because when I think about it, like he's relative, what, he's 62?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, I'm getting old now myself. I'm like, that's not old.
No.
He was ready. He was ready to go.
Yeah.
And depression, I can, and the loss of a loved one can do that for you. And I just feel, and I wonder. Of course, we're not really hearing Isaac's voice. Was there I wondered through the book, is there any way that a parent can reach out to a child, or was it a lost cause? I wonder and worry about that.
I think there are all kinds of ways Jacob could have reached out. But Jacob is so limited in his notion of masculinity, in his notion of love, in his notion of vulnerability. He's so limited and he's so imprisoned himself that he freezes. He doesn't do anything. Jacob could have driven to the college and talked to his son. Jacob could have called him, for God's sakes, but not knowing what he would say, being unsure of Isaac's response. Again, he's frozen. He's debilitated in his narrowness. And it makes him dysfunctional. It just makes him dysfunctional. It's really a sad thing, but it's true. And I've seen it so many, 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 many times. I've seen fathers just absolute inability to say, I love you to a son. I've seen it. I've seen it myself. They cannot say the words. And it's like, oh my God, is this real? It's very real. Yeah.
So another interesting part of the book was when Jacob really started learning about his parents. We really didn't get much on his father, but really his mother and his grandparents.
Right.
And especially thoughts about his he knew his grandfather was firm and mean, but so were other fathers in the community, grandfathers and fathers in the community. There was nothing really special. His grandfather seemed talented. But that really wasn't revealed to him until later. But there was nothing special. And when I think about that, because I always joke and say I had the meanest grandmother in the world, that we kind of accept that life has done that to those folks, that they had to harden their hearts even though, he loved his daughter and he loved his grandsons, he had to harden. He couldn't show any softness because the world
That's,
just wouldn't allow it from
that's
him.
right. That's exactly right. And as I was saying earlier, we as children, we don't have the slightest idea of the emotional and the psychological toil put upon a black child in the 1900s, the 1920s, the 1940s in America, whereby they were expected to be obedient, they were expected to be laborers, they were expected to do what they were told. We have no idea what it means for a child to live that way and to be given no room to dream, to be given no room to question things, to be given no room for laughter. Because as you said, I knew so many older folks who were just mean. They just seemed mean. And what I realized is because they were handed a life and then somebody else told them how to live it, right? That is a horrible existence when you have no power over your own existence, right? When their bodies were rendered available to an entire world where people touched on them and abused them and violated them and raped them and met no reprisal whatsoever. No one paid any price for it. You were there and folks could do it to you and they did, right? And you had no therapy, you had no means of working through this trauma, etc. I mean, it was really an unbelievable existence. But for those folks to birth children and to try hard to at least give them a life and invite them possibly to think for themselves was a major achievement. It was a major achievement. We just don't see it as one because we came in a time where everybody does this. And in fact, why can't we dream together? And in fact, Daddy, why can't we play basketball or why can't we play softball back and forth? Mama, why won't you come outside and play with us? What? Who does that? Especially after having worked 15 hours a day. Play? But again, we as children, we had no notion of the weight that our parents carried just to get us here.
Yeah, yeah. I think about my grandmother and how she ended up here
Yeah,
because where they lived in Mississippi, they kept blowing the school up. And she
yeah,
said, and my mother said that she had already sent her oldest daughter away to Memphis to get educated, and she was like, "They're not gonna blow my youngest child up."
uh-huh,
So she just said, "I have enough of Indianola, and I'm going."
yeah,
So, but she had to go on her own because her husband had already left. So
wow,
she packed up her kids and she had a cousin here, so she found her way here. And she had to work at a hospital, and she but it was just life was hard. And I really have, I don't think about it too often, I guess, because that's just how it was, just the story my folks told. And but I was thinking just how hard it would have been for her
oh my
on
God,
her own with only one cousin up here to really make a life for herself.
yeah,
That's
and
why she
did you,
was so no nonsense.
yeah, and how many kids did she have?
She had four,
Yeah, yeah,
three girls, one boy.
that's more than a notion.
Mhm. So let's see. Can you read a little bit of the book for us?
Sure, 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 sure. You know what's funny? I always, I've read it now so many times. I'm
Mhm.
always unsure, like, what part should I read?
Mhm.
It's always such a dilemma for an author to decide what part to read. Um, and I'm going to read a piece of this chapter that I hadn't read
Oh,
before.
and I just want to remind everyone they could put questions in the chat or in the Q&A.
Okay, awesome, awesome. And thanks to all of you for being here. I'm enormously appreciative for every single person for being here. Thank you so much. November 13th, 2003. I was born a slave, Isaac, almost literally. My grandfather raised me, and his father had been a slave until age 18. That's long enough to shape one's way of thinking and pass it along for generations. Even after freedom, we were not free. We were lynched and beaten and mobbed and raped and burnt out and stolen from and cheated and denied and degraded and humiliated and insulted and belittled and disrespected, so much that we believed white folks were God's chosen people. They had everything we wanted, it seemed, even poor whites. At least they could go to town and be served. We had to watch our backs everywhere we went. We were never safe in this country. Can you imagine that? A life where you and your family are never safe? Sunrise is a torture because you never sleep. Not that deep snoring kind of sleep. People died young back then, 40 and 50, because as the expression goes, there was no rest for the weary. And we were the weary. We were field hands, tillers of the soil, whose mirror image was the dirt itself. We took pride in working because it's what we knew, what we did best. We never believed we meant much. I see that now. We even buried one another without tombstones. No need remembering one whose only achievement was a decent spring crop or a house full of hungry children. Save that money and repair the roof. That's how folks thought back then. That's how we've been taught to think. We loved each other if love is respect. Yet respect wasn't what you and your generation wanted. You wanted something you could feel in your heart, and I didn't know what that was. My generation had never had it. Granddaddy or grandma never kissed me or read to me or touched me lovingly. I don't think granddaddy could read at all. I think grandma could a little. The only time granddaddy touched me was to whip me, and I mean he whipped hard. A whooping is different from a spanking, you know. A spanking happens on your behind. A whooping happens all over you. And when granddaddy got through with you, you'd have to get somewhere and sit down. But he loved me. I understand that now. His behavior was simply the way of black parenting. Every child I knew was beaten senseless. Elders were callous and unfeeling, as if afraid to love us. Slavery had left them that way. Granddaddy was worst of all. Nothing moved his cool, dry countenance. I rarely saw him laugh and never saw him cry. He approached life as a test of endurance, so each day he handled chores and disappointments as if trying to show God he was unbreakable. But his breaking point would come. My favorite person in the world was my brother Esau. I cannot tell you the way I loved him. He was a year and a half older than me, and he was my hero. Growing up in Arkansas, we used to lie in bed together, whispering about things. Well, I'd whisper while Esau listened. He wasn't much of a talker, but he seemed to enjoy hearing me, so I always had something to say. Where do stars come from? I asked one rainy night. He wasn't asleep. When he slept, he made a soft grumbling sound like an old electric fan. Suddenly he turned toward me, rubbed my coarse, kinky hair, and said, "They're God's thoughts." God's thoughts? Wow, he sure's got a lot of them. Esau chuckled. What do you think God thinks about? I don't know. Probably us. Us? You think God knows us out of all the people in the world? God knows everybody, Isaac, and everything. I loved how Esau rubbed my head. His heavy hand massaged my scalp sensually like a loving God might do. God knows what I think? Yep. And what you think? Yep. And what granddaddy and grandma think? Yes, boy. I heard Esau's slight irritation, so I hushed and let his hand nurture me. Then I asked, what do you think about? At first he didn't answer, but then he mumbled, Mom, Dad. His voice trembled. I didn't want him to cry because I would have cried, so I tried to change the subject, but Granddaddy yelped from the other room, You boys take your ass to sleep, hear me? Don't make me come in there after you. That ended our talking, but Esau rubbed my head until I went to sleep. The older we got, the less he did it, and the day he stopped altogether, my joy disappeared.
That's a beautiful passage.
Thank you so much.
So even though Jacob did the right thing, in the back of my head, I was thinking, you still got married too young. You weren't ready, because I don't even think he was really thinking about girls till his grandfather said, when you getting out of this house?
And the truth of the matter is 18, 19 was standard back then. In fact, actually, Jacob was old. Jacob was like 20 years old 19 or 20 or something, which was old, was certainly not old, but men who married at that age was very, that was very much a regular thing. What is true is that Jacob knew nothing about what it meant to perpetuate love in a family. He knew how to work. He knew how to keep a roof over someone's head, which he did. He knew how to pay bills, which he did. What Jacob didn't know was how to nurture a family. And the error too many black men have made is to believe that to provide is to nurture. That is not the same thing. That is not on any level the same thing. But people have made that the same thing, and it has left many, 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 many children emotionally wanting and longing. They always ate, they always had clothes, there was food on the table every day. That is true. That is absolutely true. But that does not mean they felt nurtured and they felt loved, which will leave scars all over a child. I don't care how many pairs of shoes they have.
And I think Jacob came to that realization
I think
that
so.
that was his regret.
That's right. That's exactly right.
That his son did not know, and he probably really didn't know until later how much he loved him.
That's right. He had never said it. That's right. He had never emotionally demonstrated it, and that is his life's regret. That somehow he had raised a child, and that child was unsure of his love for him. And of course, initially Jacob is troubled because he says, "You ate every day. I gave you every opportunity. You had your own room. I bought you a piano. I paid your tuition. What are you talking about?" Because only in his old age does Jacob realize that you cannot substitute the heart with things. You cannot substitute the heart with things. There is nothing that takes the place of the sharing of the heart. Nothing. And a child will long for it if you give them the rest of the world.
Because the happiest times were when the ones they spent together, especially when they went down back to Arkansas.
That's right.
And when except when Isaac scared Jacob to death at the cemetery.
Right.
But, and even then, I found that interesting because as a small child, I did something similar to my godmother. I told her about what I had done in my past life.
Yes. Yes.
And I was 3, and I couldn't tell you, but that was discouraged. So no, but I haven't really experienced that again. But my mother told me one time I scared her to death doing that. And but I just found that so amazing that that at that moment Isaac was so in touch with his ancestors there, and that he could even sense, and Jacob was too, because he knew who the missing person was.
That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. Somebody asked if I read the audio. Yes, I did the audio this time. Absolutely. So grab it.
And sorry, y'all, it's spoiler alerts all through this conversation.
That's right. There's no way to avoid them at this point because the book is out and people are reading it. So listen, you just got to run.
It's very much worth reading and listening to too. I listened to it because of my experience with you before. So I said I definitely wanted to listen to it.
Absolutely.
But if you want to buy it, it's available at Source.
That's right. Just pick it up. All you got to do is get it. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And again, thanks to everyone in the audience for being here. You all are so magnificent. You're just so wonderful. The thing I think that's interesting too in this book is, ironically, Isaac's mother wanted school worse than him, right? And she never gets there though. And she doesn't get there because she believes that as a woman, and her family believes that she's supposed to marry and have children and do all the traditional things, that women were expected to do. And she does. But one of the things I think that happens in this book, I think this author illumines the price that women have paid. Oh my God, Lord have mercy. The price women have paid to serve everybody else in the world. What women have given up, what women have compromised, what women let go of, the dream in a woman's heart of being something completely other than anything she sometimes ever even admits. And it was so powerful to me as I wrote this book to really see how this mother who was loving this child really was fighting her own hatred of the life folk had forced her to accept. And again, we grow up with mothers and we never think our mothers are tortured in their souls. Who ever thought that? We thought, well, nobody forced you to have kids. You had kids because you wanted to. You married this man because you loved him, blah, blah, blah. And only to see that actually the pressure of society, what it means to live in a world that has expectations of you, is far harder to avoid than you think. And really, Isaac doesn't really even know. He knows his mother wanted school, of course, but he doesn't really understand the emotional weight she carries from trading her life for his. But it's a beautiful thing.
I was like, that's probably why she passed first.
Maybe.
So, yeah, because, but I did like that she eventually got to pull him out of his depression. She got Jacob, and I found it interesting that that we didn't know that she ever dated anyone. Maybe she just didn't want to be bothered anymore. Right. I don't know. We don't know.
We don't know. Right.
She may have had some, dated some other people, but we wouldn't know either. That's
right. That's right.
That she was able to give him books gave him Malcolm X. And why was Malcolm X important as the first book that he really tried to read, that he successfully read?
Because I think culturally, Black people think of Malcolm X as kind of the metaphor of our manhood, collectively. We think of Malcolm's strength. We think of his boldness. We think of Malcolm's character. Malcolm went to jail and transformed himself. There are all kinds of ways that Malcolm's life and Malcolm's existence seems to illustrate what Black people historically have understood as the pride of a man, and so when she gives him this book, I think she's trying to suggest to him that there are elements of manhood and masculinity in Malcolm's life that would do you well to know, right? And I think it's true, and I think it happens. I think that book so transforms him. First of all, he had never read a book about a Black man ever in life. And that's funny too. This man, Jacob, has never read a book in his life. We have not the slightest idea for how many men that's true. I think that was true for my father. I don't think my father ever read a whole book in his entire living days. He lived to be almost 80 years old. I don't think he ever read a book. And that's so funny because I've read thousands. But I don't think my father ever read a book. I mean, that seems simple, but just think about that for a minute. And what it means, how in the world do you breed an imagination if you don't read? You don't. And what I realized is, oh my God, my father gave up, if you will, his imagination as a child. And then if you give that up, how do you live? You live in this reality.
All the
that's
time.
Why. That's right. And that's right. And that's why they were so hard, Christine. Because this reality was unkind. This reality was brutal. This reality was harsh. For Black folks in the 30s and 40s, this reality was harsh. Baby, it was brutal. The reason we have a different level is because through reading, through knowledge, etc., we can at least imagine another world. We can at least escape, right, through artistic means. They did not have those opportunities. My God, what a way to live. But to be able to endure it such that you could bring forth another generation. These people were strong in ways that is absolutely impossible to measure. They had to be.
And I also found it interesting that the next book he mentions is The Color Purple. And for a man as traditional as he is, he saw so much truth in it and identified with those people and felt sympathy for those women. And I was like, that's another turning point for him because he felt sympathy, especially feeling sympathy for those women. For he found, there was a Celie that he grew up with.
That's right.
And once he saw it, and he talked about a young woman in their community where he grew up, and she was had some of those same experiences, and he was like, he knew this. He was like, he didn't understand when people said this couldn't be true, and this was because he said he knew it to be true from
Right.
growing up in the country.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And so, yeah, I mean, I think, in fact, in The Color Purple, I think he literally sees his own grandfather. And I think he sees himself. And I think he is floored. I think he's flabbergasted. I think he's horrified at the possibility that he has turned into his grandfather. And I think that's exactly what happened. That's why this is Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or really Abraham, Jacob, and Isaac. But I'm playing on this, on the biblical story. I'm playing on this triptych, right? This trilogy of generations of men and how their lives impact each other. I'm really talking about generational trauma here, right? But not just trauma. I'm also talking about generational survival and how we pass on means and notions of survival from one generation, how we want to shape the other generation, but how in many ways the new generation pushes back against the life we try to hand onto them. And Isaac is the repository of lots of things. He's repository of strength and beauty and power. He gets this land. He inherits this land. Oh my God, all this land in Arkansas. But he's also the repository of difficulty and strife and heartache, right? And Isaac's job will be to work through the complicated nature of his lineage and his inheritance until he shapes something he can adore, until he shapes something he can respect. That's always the son's job. The son's job is to get rid of the parts of his father, right, that do not serve him, but to hold on to those parts that make him survive.
Um, I'm gonna ask Jasmine's question here. Jasmine Wilson says, Dr. Black, was your experience writing this novel different than the others you've written? If so, what distinguishes this experience from others?
This novel was different. Hey, Jazz, what's up? This novel was different. It absolutely was different. And I think it was different because this novel was so unbelievably personal. You know, the others are fiction too, and they have been about Black people. This one was not just about Black people, but it was about Black people I know. And in so many ways, though not 100%, in many ways, it was about the Black father I knew. Right. And that did make it difficult. It did make it difficult. And in some instances, it made it difficult because I discovered myself as the writer that there were ways also that I had been unfair to my own father in terms of things I held against him. You know, you cannot ask a person for more than the person has the ability and the capacity to give you. Now, that's different than if they have it and won't give it to you. That's very different than literally, I don't have. If somebody needs $100 and if you have 50, and if you give them 50, what most people miss is you got to fall on your knees and praise that individual, not simply thank them. You must fall on your knees and praise because they didn't just give you something, they gave you everything they had. It just wasn't everything you needed. And that can be hard because when you need $100, 50 is only half. Right? It can seem so simple, but it's really profound for somebody to give you the totality of what they have. That's really a God. That's a savior to you. But sometimes we critique them because they didn't have 50 more. Ooh. My God. It's just profound. It's really profound. And I realize that in this text, that there are so many ways that my father gave every single piece he had. I just wanted some different things. I wanted some more. I wanted some other things. And the 50 he had, was greater than the 10 his grandfather had. See, that thing it gets so deep. It gets so profoundly deep. Because when you come out of slavery like his grandfather did, you know, he said the grandfather wasn't a slave. His daddy had been a slave. To come out of slavery and to buy land and to build your own house, even if it was a shack, was a colossal achievement. But nobody today thinks that's an achievement to live in a shack. In fact, we absolutely critique that. But there was a day when that shack was really, truly a mansion. And then to rear a child who cannot live in a shack, but live in a brand new house. What? With a yard. Oh my God. And a child with his own room. Do you know what a black child with his own room, do you understand? That really literally is royalty. But that ain't deep. It's so profound. And so in this book, I'm really hoping to help a younger, what I say, generation understand that we're on a continuum. We're in a legacy of survival. We're in a legacy of achievement. And Black folks have worked miracles with nothing. We have built lives. We have built lives with no breath at all. Remarkable. But too many of us miss it because it's so much less than what we have now, or so much less than what we dreamed.
We're so focused, I think, on the material. We've evolved in the material that we can get you. You graduate from high school. You're in high school, and we can get you a car. You have your own bedroom and a bathroom too. We don't have to share. But emotionally, a lot of us still aren't there because we don't know that. We didn't know we were supposed to evolve that part. We just knew we were supposed to do, the American dream part. We didn't know we were supposed to have counseling, or not even, just talk it out with someone. We don't know any, but you don't tell folks your business.
Right. That's absolutely right.
If it wasn't for, one friend and his ex-wife, Jacob would have died before, just of depression.
That's right. That's absolutely right. And part of and Christine, what I don't intend for my ancestors to go down uncelebrated. I don't intend for Black ancestors to go down uncelebrated. I don't intend for Black elders to have carved out an existence and a survival in this country. And people miss the magnitude and the depth of their work. I don't intend it. I do not mean for that to happen. If it's the last thing I do, we're going to understand the price that was paid for Black life in this country. I'm going to do that because those ancestors gave too much for us not to praise them. Our ancestors gave too much for us to give all of our glory to some other people. Oh, hell no. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And I see now myself, as a father figure to so many, as a professor at a Black college. I'm at Clark Atlanta University, an amazing school with amazing students. I've been there 30 years. And it would be a crime to be there 30 years and students never speak your name. Something's wrong. Something is absolutely wrong with that. So what I'm really saying here is there's an agenda of sorts, right? To make sure that the ancestors and their offspring see each other. And that's my hope.
Yeah, there's nothing like the mission of living a life in service to our folks.
That's right. That's absolutely right. Yeah, that's absolutely right. It must be done. It must be done.
So can you tell us a little bit about the future, about Isaac? I know you can't tell us totally about the next book, but we are going to hear from Isaac.
We are going to hear from Isaac. Yes, I can go ahead and tell you that Isaac's story is coming. In fact, I'm halfway finished with it. Isaac does this favor to his father. Isaac returns to the same form, right? Isaac says, "Daddy, you wrote me, so I'm going to write you back." Though his father is in the ancestral realm by this point, right? But Isaac definitely writes his father back. And oh my God, some of this story is killing me. Because you just never know how did Isaac process this? What did Isaac think? What does he believe now? Who is Isaac now? And we come to find out. We absolutely come to find out. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful story. And even like, does Isaac even read his father's letters? Is he so mad at him that he throws him in the fire and burns? We'll learn all of that.
Another thought I had about reading that book is community. And I felt that one of the things I thought that Jacob lacked, well, especially moving to the city, but even in the country, he wouldn't have much of it, was he really didn't have, he had the guys at the post office.
Right.
He didn't go to church.
Right.
But he really didn't have much of a community.
He did.
And I think that was, I know that was a problem.
Oh, it was devastating for him. It was devastating for him because he grew up with such community in Arkansas that he never even thought about it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But it shaped him and molded him. And community was the context in which his identity rested. And when he gets to Kansas City without that, he's naked. He's on his own. He's unsure of himself. His confidence melts away in so many instances. And remember, at one point, he tells Isaac, if I could do this again, I would raise you on the land. Like, I'd take you back home. It's what I knew. It's the context that I understood best. It's the ways of God that I was most familiar with. It was the place where my strength was most obvious. And that sense of community cannot be underestimated, because community assures that your own faults and failures don't become the definition of who you are or of your children. See, the beauty of community is that when you're less than your best, the community can cover you, right? When you're not doing so well today, your kids can run and play at the neighbor's house, right? When you need to stay out longer than maybe you normally will, an auntie, a cousin, a grandmother can step in and cover you, right? I remember this well as a kid. I grew up in rural Arkansas, and without community, I would never have made it. I mean, never have made it. Community was absolutely my salvation. From the church to the neighbors, to neighbors' kids who we played with, just places where I could escape and put distance between me and my father's tension. It saved my life. It absolutely, positively saved my life. So it was not just important, it was sacrosanct. It really was.
Now, he really doesn't talk about, Jacob doesn't, Rachel's family.
He doesn't.
He kind of blamed her drinking on them.
Yep, that's right.
I don't know how true that is, but I wonder why he didn't really, or did they not, but he said that her mother liked them, and her aunt, but he wasn't really folded into their family.
He was not. And when he goes to Kansas City, remember, he's a country boy. Her people are city people, city folks. And he doesn't like that way of life. He just does not like that way of life. He moves to Kansas City because when he first gets there, he's thinking he's in heaven. No dirt roads, no picking of peas and cotton all day long. Oh, this must be wonderful. But viscerally and in terms of ethos, he does not like the energy there. He does not know that energy. It does not feel like it loves him. But now he's there because he's bought a house and now he has a family. So he has to stay. And he does. But it does not serve him well. And in terms of her family, he's not committed to knowing her family and loving. He's committed, quite frankly, to going to work every day. Right? He hangs out with some of the boys from the post office, that kind of thing, absolutely. And pretty much that's his whole life. Yeah.
Because I don't think his grandfather had one or two friends that were kind of discussed, but his grandfather wasn't very outgoing either.
That's right. And masculinity in the rural South meant a black man standing on his own, standing alone, standing on his own 2 feet. Masculinity in the South absolutely was a notion of a man. What can you do? How do you cover yourself? How do you take care of yourself? Very few people, black men in the South, borrowed anything, anytime from anyone. In fact, my father's art was how to make do without it, right? Or how to create it and find it on your own. Daddy used to tell me all the time, do not, do not borrow things. He used to tell us that all the time. Don't borrow things. Do without it. Do without. Daddy said, before you borrow a hoe from a neighbor for your garden, get a stick and dig in the ground. Don't, but see, part of this, what I didn't understand then, I understand now. What Daddy was really saying is, do not become a slave again. Don't be a slave to anything and anyone. Don't owe anybody anything. It's a profound kind of thing. But they were trying to avoid a bondage out of which they had just recently escaped.
Someone commented, yes, community is the key. How can we all get to that sacred place that we all missed? Even right now in Africa, that concept of belonging to the community is no more.
What do you? Yeah.
Thanks for bringing this out, Dr. Black.
Ajo is so, I know this woman. She's magnificent. She's brilliant. She's bilingual. Hey, Ajo. Ajo is just fantastic. I love her. And I think one of the things we have to do now to create community is that we have to be intentional about it. We have to decide that we want to be in community together. We have to decide that. Right? There was once a day when it was just part of our cultural reality. That's not true much anymore. But I'm saying it's our salvation as a people. We need community like our bodies need air. We need other people to check in on us. We need to call and see how folks are doing. We need to gather together. It's critical. It's absolutely positively critical. We do not do well without it. We do not do well without it. And so the answer to the question is, how do we build it? By intentionally deciding that we need each other, and by getting to the place where we decide that needing each other is a beautiful thing, not a personal deficit. To need somebody is not a personal deficit. To need somebody welcomes somebody else's gift into your life. Right? To need somebody allows somebody else to experience significance. The worst thing in the world is for people to get to the place, or to fight to get to the place where we don't need each other. It's like the seed trying to figure out how not to need rain. Not only is it a lost cause, but it is destroying itself.
So I think that's one of the biggest messages of that book, separate to the relationship, is the community.
Yes.
Is that I think if he had just had somewhere, there was a male friend somewhere he could have had that said, just love your son. He needed somebody to just say that to him, just love your son.
Right. That's right.
Or to be around people where he saw an example that had nothing to do with sports, of raising a child.
Right. That's absolutely right. It's absolutely right. And by the end of this book, what Jacob now knows, is that the world is bigger than him. What he now knows is that he raised a marvelous black man. It's just not the black man he dreamed. But what does that teach us? That there are Christine, you about to. What does that teach us? That it teaches us that there are manifestations of God that are beyond your imagination. There are manifestations of masculinity that are beautiful and wonderful and excellent, and that are nothing like you. So when you use yourself as the model of a thing, you have already limited God's creation.
Amen.
Well, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, because, let folks be who they are.
That's right. That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. Because if you don't, you're going to destroy you and them. And who you think you are, that you think is so wonderful and so correct, is absolutely positively offensive to somebody else.
Oh, very true. but that's okay too.
That's right.
'Cause everybody's not for everybody.
That's right. That's right. That's absolutely right. Yeah. Dang, it's already 7?
Just about. That was fun.
My gosh. Wow.
That was fun.
Tons
We
of
always
fun.
had good conversations in Detroit, though.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I love Detroit. And I had an aunt. This is funny. My grandmother's sister, actually my great grandmother's sister, migrated to Detroit back in the 20s and the 30s, and she lived there ever since. She would come to Arkansas to visit us every year. She came annually. She'd stay 2 weeks. And I always said one day I wanted to go and see if I could find where she lived. And I don't know, but I'm going to find it one day. But she was in Detroit.
Well, if you email me her name, I probably could find her. I
I'm
work with some genealogists too, so we
Really?
probably could find her.
I bet we could. I bet we could. And if I can get her obituary, I'm sure it would say like the name of the church that she attended, and then it's a done deal.
Yep. Yeah. So yeah, we could probably find her.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let me say finally to everyone, thank you tremendously for being here tonight. Thank you all for reading and loving this book, or thank you for what you will read and love, I hope. Thank you for being open to the transformation of this text, because we're trying not only to write good literature, I am trying to do that, but we're also trying to write literature that makes us see ourselves, right, as a mirror image back to a people, that we might become more beautiful and more magnificent and more wonderful, but also to understand that we cannot become more wonderful until we realize that we come from wonder, right? And I'm excited about that. Black people are a wonder. Black people are a wonder in this nation, and I intend for Black youth, and I intend for this entire country to know that.
Thank you. I'm gonna read a couple more comments, and then we're gonna, let's see. Sourcebook says, "Thank you for the book. We love hand selling it. It sounds just like the AUC. At the same time, I went to Spelman at the same time, or close to when you started at Clark." That's Allison. She's the owner at Source. So, and there's some thank yous, and yes, we are, and some nice emojis. So, thank you, Dr. Black.
Absolutely.
Hopefully, next time we'll see you back in person.
Yes. I hope so, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yep. So hopefully with the next book, so that'll probably be what this is 22. We'll say 23, 24. We'll be back in person.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you for spending the evening with us. Good night, everyone.
See y'all. Y'all are great. Talk to y'all later.
Thank you. Bye-bye.